So I guess we can start. Good morning, everyone. This is Nicola speaking from Cepi. Welcome to this webinar on wind energy package. This will be a duet in the sense that the presentation will be done by me, and then when it comes to the biomass sustainability criteria, that will be done by my colleague Ulrich, who is at the moment in the Parliament, so he will be joining us at a certain stage during the presentation. So before we start with the presentation, I would just like to say a few practical issues. You notice that we've been all muted. That's because we are quite many registered, and for the easiness of the seminar, we will be doing we will be all muted. So this means that if you want to ask questions, and please do ask questions, but use the dedicated question panels on the right side of your screen. Please, it goes without saying, but try to be as concise as possible and to the point. That would also facilitate me and Ulrich in going through the questions and readdressing them. The slides that are going to be used now for the presentation will be circulated right after the event, and this webinar is recorded, and then we will be also uploading it on the YouTube Cepi channel. And yeah, last but not least, at the end of this webinar, you will receive a small request for a short feedback, and we would really appreciate if you could take those few minutes to fill it in. That would be a very valuable information for us in terms of how we're going to schedule our future activities. So having said that, and with no further ado, let's move to the core of the presentation. And yeah, there's been a long waiting, so it looked a bit like if it was for the election of the Pope when it comes to this winter package. And if you can see on your left side, there's been the announcement from the Šefčovič when he was on stage yesterday presenting the package, and he went without any hesitation, saying this is the most profound change since the centralized energy system was introduced in our continent. I think it's quite a bold statement, and we'll see then in the coming months, years, what's going to happen with these proposals. Also on the right side, you see the Commissioner Cañete. The moment the Cabinet of Commissioners approved the package, that's the package. And that is something like 1,200 plus pages of legislative proposals. And that's not it, just proposals, it's a lot more. So actually that package just is on legislation. But just to give you a feeling of what is in this package, I tried to put everything in one slide so that you can have a general feeling of what it is all about. And it's there is a chapeau communication. Now this winter package is being rebranded as Clean Energy for All Europeans. And there are legislative proposals on the electricity markets, and this is 4 proposals plus other documents of say evaluation of how the market is working. Energy efficiency, it's another 5 legislative proposals plus evaluations of how the measures have been effectively implemented. And also work program for the future when it comes to eco-design, which is the energy efficiency regulation for products. There is 1 proposal on renewables and evaluation of current policy measures, and 1 proposal on overall EU governance to get to this 2030 goal when it comes to energy and climate change. And then there are reports on energy prices and costs, on funding, on innovation, and the communication on transport. Now, of course, in this 1 hour, 1 hour and a half of webinar, we cannot go through everything. So we've been just focusing on the areas where there are legislative proposals. And this is specifically in the part when it comes to the energy union governance, energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, where then Ulrich will tap in and they will deal with bioenergy. And then last but not least, what are the new rules for the electricity market design? Of course, it goes without saying, but because issues are not in this presentation doesn't mean that this is the whole work that we are going in Cepi. There is much more that needs to be done, and that will be done by going through all the details of all these proposals by the appropriate groups that are within the Cepi structure of expertise, meaning certainly a lot of this will be covered by the Energy and Climate Change Committee, but there is also the raw material committee that will have to deal with the forestry issue and the bioenergy. There will be the transport network dealing with transport communication and so forth. So I think there is much more to say about the package, but we'll do it all in due time. So let's move to the first package, a part of this package, which is the energy union governance. So just to make it as straightforward as possible, this proposal is trying to integrate all the national energy and climate plans that member states would be required to draft for the period 2021 to 2030. This is an iterative process whereby member states draft plans, they send to the Commission evaluates, then there are progress reports and then back and forth to see whether countries are in line to get to the targets. The areas that are covered in these plans is pretty much everything that has to do with energy and climate change. Therefore, what are the progresses on the decarbonization of the economy, renewable energy targets, energy efficiency, security of supply, openness of the internal energy market, but also whatever is on, for instance, on LULUCF, land use and land use change and forestry. All these will have to be reported in these plans, and then there will be this kind of continuous updates and progress reports. Why are they doing it? Well, there is certainly an issue of necessity of streamlining the reporting, but also there is an issue with the energy targets which have been set at European level for energy efficiency and of renewables, whereby the targets are set at European level, but there are no national targets. This is what the European Council was very clear about in October 2014 when the macro picture over the 2030 targets was drafted. And there it was clear there would not be national targets on energy efficiency and renewables. So the Commission had to come out with this kind of soft pushing in terms of making sure that everybody is moving ahead. So from a visual point of view, basically nowadays member states are required to plan, to report and monitor, and all this is done multiplied by n numbers of a dossier, which means that sometimes you have on energy, on renewable energies, for instance, you will have whatever minister in charge of energy is there with his own deadline in terms of when to report. Then there is the Minister of Environment who is dealing with climate change and needs to have his own reporting activities. All these are trying to bring them under one integrated streamline of communication or reporting and assessment. And these all will also be brought in line with the Paris Agreement review cycle, which requires updates every 5 years of progresses of countries in reducing carbon emissions. So this is in a way an attempt to bring everything, I would say, in the same reporting exercise. And when it comes to the timeline, basically member states will be required already in 2018 to draft plans. Then this will be reviewed with comments from the Commission so that the final plans will be then submitted by beginning of 2019. And then they start for the period 2021-2030, and then every 2 years there is a progress report whereby you will, member states will have to report, Commission assessing whether countries are in line or not with the projected targets, and then they will receive recommendations, and then it goes on in trying to see how these targets can be achieved also in a more coordinated fashion. And that would be all kind of a periodic review, and then that would be also, there would be a midterm review where the countries will have to evaluate exactly whether the 2030 plans will have to be reviewed in view of changed circumstances or whether they are still valid. And then therefore, and then towards the end of this plans, so towards 2028, they will have already to start implementing a new plan for the next 10 years. That will be then again re-evaluated with progress reports exactly according to this plan. So it's kind of member states pretty much know what they will have to do between now and 2050. Few comments on this energy union governance. The first is exactly on the governance, and that is okay. We have EU targets, and we have governments who are expected to perform according to whatever is the commitment made by these countries. But then the question is, what happens if governments are not delivering or are not delivering as expected? And then this is, in a way, is where the weak part starts to unveiling. So basically, the Commission will have to issue a recommendation. Recommendation will be to the EU member states as a whole, but could also be to specific member states. And then governments are expected to take utmost account of the recommendation. So that is something that it needs to be seen exactly what does it mean, especially when the recommendation applies to all member states, what exactly a specific member state is expected to be doing. Likewise, if member state is lagging behind, how detailed can recommendation from the Commission be, and what is exactly the government supposed to, how is the government supposed to react to this kind of recommendation? But that would be seen. That has to be seen. The second point that it would require a bit of thinking from our side is, and I think for any industrial side, is this streamlining of reporting going to reduce the administrative burden, or is going to increase it? And that's to be seen, I would say. On the one hand, we might say that probably if you've been exposed until now to many requests from national authorities to deliver a certain amount of data at different point in time, that might be simplification. At the same time, now on all these progress periodic reports and evaluation every 2 years, it needs to be seen to what extent the national authorities will have to come back to industries to ask for more clarification or more details. And I think that's something that it will require a bit of assessment from our side. That's for the governance. I would, for the sake of simplicity, I will run through the presentation and I will collect questions at the end, but please feel free to pose them already now, and then I will collect them afterwards. So, energy efficiency. So the objectives of the energy efficiency package is, first of all, to set what is the 2030 energy efficiency target. And in the last round of negotiations between commissioners, yesterday around lunchtime, it was agreed to have a 30% binding target at European level. Now, what does it mean? They've been extremely detailed in setting up what does it mean in terms of total amount of energy consumption by 2030. And it is both indicated as primary energy and in final energy consumption. Personally, always get fascinated when they come with these numbers, with this precise detail up to the last number, and instead of having rounded numbers. But okay, I guess they wanted to make a point that they've been doing quite a lot of research on these numbers. There would be also, as a part of the EU governance that we discussed, that I presented before, there would be a system of progress and an assessment in how these governments are reaching the 2030 target, and have some sort of reporting mechanism if measures are not sufficient and governments are not in line. There's also quite some emphasis in empowering consumers to be more on the conscious of the energy consumption. So there is lots of emphasis on smart meters, and so that they are aware of their consumption behaviors. There is an attempt to reduce administrative burden on member states and to improve the reporting of national measures and savings as also part of the governance. Now, the energy efficiency segment is addressed in different proposals. There is a proposal to review the Energy Efficiency Directive. There is a proposal to review the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And then there are also legislative proposals on products with eco-design, and a work program for the next years on what other regulation on products is going to be proposed by the Commission. Clearly, I'm going to focus only on, in this presentation, only on the first one, on the Energy Efficiency Directive review, because that's the one that is affecting us the most. And of course, that will also, in any case, the others will require at least a look at it to be sure that we're not missing anything there. So what are the relevant energy efficiency provisions in the review? First of all, let's start with targets. As I mentioned before, it would be an EU binding target of 30% on energy efficiency, and governments will not have national targets, but they will be required to set absolute levels of primary and final energy consumption by 2020, and that would be followed by they will have to put some indicative targets for 2030. On the energy savings obligations, the current requirement to have annual energy savings of 1.5% yearly, that is basically continuing extrapolated until 2030. It was really the case before, but it's also confirmed now. There is a possibility for member states to have some flexibility in exempting some areas from these national annual energy savings. And one of that includes also the possibility of excluding installations, industrial installations, which are covered by the emission trading scheme. There is only one limitation, and that is that the total amount of exemptions, so all the categories that are subject to exemptions, including the ETS, cannot exceed 20% of the annual energy savings. And then, of course, that is going to have different impacts when it comes to how member states are going to do it and what is the relative share of industry in different countries. This might restrict quite significantly the exemption from these obligations for industry. On the primary energy calculation, this is gets a bit technical, but I think it's important to notice that for CHP, so combined heat and power, the calculations remain the same. The segments on CHP has not been touched by this review. But what they've done is that they've been lowering the amount of primary energy savings for the use of electricity from 2.5 to 2.0. This is a bit technical and complicated to go through in details, at least in this general presentation. But the point is that this is an attempt to facilitate more use of electricity in end consumption, and that's because the way that the calculations are made up, basically with the 2.5 means that the maximum efficiency of an electrical installation would be 40% because it needs to be divided by 2.5 in primary energy. If it's 2.0, of course, then it would be 50% efficient. So even if you're not doing anything, you're keep on using, for instance, your electrical radiator as it was before, now it would be more efficient. And that's because there is more use of renewables in the system. Last point on these specificities of the proposals. There is an article in the Energy Efficiency Directive on the energy audits for industry. This article is not part of the revision, and the reason for not reviewing it is because there is still member states have some timing for implementing this provision, and the Commission had not had time yet to evaluate how effective is the provision on these energy audits. So it doesn't mean that because it's not in the proposal then it's done. It's just that at the moment that is out. Things might change in the future. So also here, few comments from my side to watch out when it comes to how we're gonna follow this dossier. Well, of course, on the targets, there is again the issue mentioned before on the governance. What's going to happen if member states are lagging behind, particularly when we saw from experience that once you have harvested the low-hanging fruits on energy efficiency, then to get to the additional measures becomes exponentially more complicated and costly. Having these absolute figures on energy consumption, both in primary and final energy consumption, it poses some question marks when it comes to industrial production and growth. Are we going to basically tell industries that they want to grow, say, sorry, you reached the limit, you can't produce anymore, you better move? Of course, I don't think anybody in Brussels, well, almost anybody in Brussels is thinking about that, but it cannot be ruled out either. So I think that is something that will have to be thoroughly assessed and discussed also when it comes to setting targets for member states and assessing what are the underlying conditions. There's another point on energy savings obligation schemes, this extrapolation to 1.5 rate. Again, it's easy for policymakers to say, well, let's just prolong it another 10 years and that's it. But again, as I said before, the cost and availability of these measures is going to be quite a challenge with the passing by. And then there is the last point, which is a link to the savings obligation schemes, and it is on the policy overlaps. These obligation schemes are socialized, which means that it would be part of the what's called non-negotiable element of the electricity bill. And so all these charges that we'll have to pay no matter what. And that will be coming on industries. We don't know if the industry will covered by the ETS will be covered or not. And there is already quite some noise in Brussels saying, well, the more energy efficiency is promoted, the more the carbon price will be depressed. And the more the carbon price would be depressed, the more surplus of allowances would be in the system. And the more surplus will be in the system, the more, the ones who are familiar with the ETS, the more the market stability reserve will come into place and it will absorb this excess of allowances and it will be stored in a separate reserve, with the result of increasing carbon prices. So we'll have, on the one hand, to pay for this non-negotiable element of the electricity tariff through the obligation schemes, and on the other hand, we'll have to pay higher carbon prices. So it will be kind of, the more you perform, the more you are punished, which is a bit of a counterintuitive situation. But anyway, that would be for later for discussion. Now, moving on to the renewables directive. Few general remarks before moving to the bioenergy. Well, first of all, there are many objectives that try to get with these proposals. The EU wants to have these ambitions to become the world #1 in leader in renewables, and at the same time, they will want to achieve at least 25% at EU level of renewables, and that's because they've seen that in any way business as usual will not deliver this 27%. So more measures are needed. And so there is an issue, and there is pretty much picture in this graphic, like how do we collectively achieve this target, given that member states will not have any more national targets? How do we make sure that these renewables are deployed in the most cost-effective way, and how this is going to interact with the market, the way the electricity market works? There is the issue of bioenergy sustainability that will be tackled by Ulrich in a couple of minutes. Of course, how to address use of renewables in two areas which have been so far quite left a bit aside. One is in transport, and how to stimulate, also how to take into consideration biofuels, how to promote advanced biofuels. That's one of the issues. And then the last one is how to promote renewables in the heating sector, which is the one that is consuming the most of the energy in Europe and still is largely forgotten. So briefly on what are the relevant provisions in this Renewable Energy Sources Directive review. Also in this case, setting the scene for 2030 EU targets. To notice, at the moment, member states have 2020 national targets that need to be met under the current directive. So the proposal is to use those as a baseline, meaning that in moving forward, member states cannot go below the national targets set in 2020. If they do so, there is a penalty, which means that will require them to make a financial contribution to a EU fund to support renewables. There is also the possibility of contributing to this fund if the EU as a whole is lagging behind on this objective. And I'll get that in a moment. I have a slide that hopefully will clarify a bit better these mechanisms. On support schemes for renewables, RES-E is for electricity. Support schemes, they will continue because they saw that by removing the support schemes, the share of renewables would fall. But these support schemes will have to be market-based and market responsive, meaning that already in the current state aid guidelines, there's been a switch, and these fixed and unflexible feed-in tariffs will disappear, are required to progressively disappear, and they will promote much more what is called feed-in premium or tendering procedures, everything that pretty much will try to stimulate efficiency in this technology so that they can become able to compete on their own on the electricity market. Also important to stress no retroactive changes to legislation, which is something which created quite some issues in the past. Another issue that might be issue of discussions, but the member states will be required to partially but progressively open up the support schemes that have nationally to cross-border participation. So if other installations are producing outside of a country, but they are exporting that electricity to that specific country, then would be also eligible to support schemes in the same way. Biofuels in transport, that is something which will be also an issue for quite contentious, I would say. There is an obligation to progressively increase the share of biofuels but the numbers are going to be a bit tricky because there is an issue of what is the absolute number, what is the number, take into consideration the contribution of food-based biofuels that will be, they're trying to cap in order to avoid the competition with food. And that's where you will also see quite some unhappiness from some stakeholders in Brussels, particularly from the agro-food sectors who have been investing quite a bit on biofuels. One note that I think is quite important. There's been they managed to squeeze in something which is a bit hidden in the recitals, but it's quite crucial. The idea that low carbon fossil fuels produced from fossil waste streams, they also be counted as renewables. So that is the carbon capture and use. This is something that's being pushed by some industrial stakeholders. So basically the idea that if you could capture CO2 from the chimney and use it to produce hydrogen in combustion fuels, that should be considered as renewable, as the CO2 is renewable. I'll leave it up to you for that, but certainly that is an issue that will be quite of interest to follow in negotiations. Renewable heating and cooling, there is this obligation for energy suppliers to annually increase by 1% the share of renewable energy in their annual sales until 2030. And that is something that it will be also interesting to see what is on the specificities, because share of renewables could be sharing electricity consumption, but when it comes to heating, could also be direct use of biomass or district heating. And I was already reading this morning that some of the some sectors linked to the forest-based society, I would say, they start raising some concerns that this might be a call for further mobilization of wood directly to be burned in heating for heating purposes. On biomass, I'll leave it to Ulrich in a moment. My last slide before passing the microphone to Ulrich is on this whole governance element. So you will see that there are starting from the bottom going upwards, there are these two blue lines. That is what will be required by the review of the Renewables Directive. And that is, you will have to have national targets, and if they fall below these national targets, there will be this mandatory contribution to the EU fund. Then there will be some sector-specific measures, which is the blending mandate for biofuels, the heating and cooling obligation, provision for facilitating the self-consumers to produce electricity, primarily that is aimed for domestic consumers. But then again, then there is an issue of enabling conditions, and that includes also what are the funding streams which are there. So what are the whatever use of also of national resources through state aid. That will be part of this overall governance element that will apply to renewables, but also energy efficiency and to everything else. And then specifically on renewables, if there is a gap between whatever governments are delivering collectively and what is the EU aspirational goal to get to this at least 27%, then what are the measures that governments will be required to do? And there is still the possibility to, at least in the Commission intention, to contribute to this EU fund. And then, of course, this will have to be seen on what does it mean in terms of practicalities and how member states would be willing to go through it. This is all from the renewable non-bioenergy element. Then now we go into the bioenergy sustainability criteria, and for this I would need the support from Ulrich, who, from what I understood, is on the phone and who will drive us in this section on bioenergy. Present your slides. We're at slide number 20.
All right. Thank you very much, Nicola. I have I have the look through the part on the bioenergy sustainability policy, and since this is a crucial issue in our industry, we are on the one side a strong producer of bioenergy, but we have also faced a lot of competition on the raw material from bioenergy, emerging bioenergy sectors. And we have been working on this issue quite hard. So let me bring you through and remind you about the options from the impact assessment. So the options for the Commission were basically to rely on other elements of the climate and energy framework and on national policies to ensure the sustainability of biomass. The second option was to have an extension of the biofuels sustainability criteria to solid biomass. As you know, in Article 17 of the existing RES directive, there are already sustainability criteria for biofuels and extend those. A third option was then to include the LULUCF dimension, and a fourth option was to include also efficiency requirements at the end use stage for heat and power use of bioenergy. A fifth option was also looked at in the impact assessment, and that was to look at roundwood specifically and see whether there could be a cap on the use of roundwood above certain diameters. Now, what we see from the proposal presented tomorrow, and Nicola, can you pass on to the next slide, please?
Sure.
So what we observe is that a mix of different options has been chosen. We see that some elements of the option 2, so having an extension of biofuels criteria to biomass, so that if you use forest biomass, be it for biofuels or for biomass, they would have the same criteria when it comes to the sourcing of that material. But we see also elements of this risk-based approach and basing on national sustainability legislation. We also see that the Commission is distinguishing the approach on biomass supply on the one hand. So what are the carbon criteria in LULUCF, and what are the forest management criteria, so for the biomass supply, and on the other hand looking at efficiency, and they're taking different approaches on those two. On the supply, so when we look further into the directive proposal, this is all gathered in Article 26, which is the former Article 17, where we see new provisions that are more specific to forest biomass. So this risk-based approach on the forest management and the LULUCF requirements, so requirements on the land use change and forestry. So on this risk-based approach to the forest management, the basic principle would be to look first if the biomass comes from a country where harvesting is subject to national laws, and whether they are also enforced to ensure that a certain amount of criteria are complied with. For example, that there is harvesting according to permits, that there is regeneration of the harvested areas, that high conservation values, so biodiversity, is protected, and that I think a very important one, that in the long term the harvesting does not impact, exceed the forest protection capacity. And basically a second step would be that if biomass is from a country where such national laws cannot ensure those criteria, then the evidence would have to come from the forest holding level, and then the similar criteria would have to be complied to, but at a forest holding level. And so that is the idea on the forest, on this new forest management criteria that has been introduced. On LULUCF, so this is the paragraph 6 in Article 26. So there, the idea is that the harvested biomass has to come from a country or then a broad economic region where the forest biomass is meeting LULUCF requirements at the country level. So is that country a party to the Paris Agreement and has it ratified it? Has it submitted an NDC, so a nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC? And is there a system in place at the national level again to report greenhouse gas emissions from the land use and forestry sector? And again, then we have the same principle as for the forest management criteria, that if such an evidence cannot be made available at the country level, that doesn't exclude such a supply of wood, but then there need to be management systems in place to basically prove at the forest holding that the carbon stocks and the sinks level in the forest are maintained. And there is a review clause by 2023, so meaning that the Commission will establish whether this system of forest sustainability criteria is working, and then if needed also make new proposals if it is deemed unsuccessful. So this is on the supply side, and then on the end use, so the specific use for biomass in electricity and in heating. For those installations, there is a requirement to have greenhouse gas savings of 80% compared to fossil fuel equivalent from 2021, and 85% greenhouse gas savings from 2026. And additionally, there is member states wouldn't be allowed to give support to electricity only from biomass, so only CHP installations if it is above 20 megawatt fuel capacity. And but there are a certain number of exemptions to that. For example, this is for new installations, so there's a grandfathering clause saying that the existing installations can continue to be supported, and also that there is if those installations are crucial for security of supply, then there can be an exemption to the support of electricity only plants. What we should also note is that the Commission proposal has a clause stating that member states can place additional sustainability requirements for the biomass fuels, and what is also important is that member states have to require the economic operators to show the criteria are fulfilled. When it comes to the verification, so how are these criteria verified, we have also a new element. So until now, for biofuels, there have been a certain number of voluntary schemes that have been endorsed by the Commission, and those will remain. But what is new is that member states will also be able to set up national schemes for the verification of compliance to those sustainability criteria. So this is the part on bioenergy sustainability in the Renewable Energy Directive. But if you turn to the next slide, please, Nicola, we also have provisions outside the Renewable Energy Directive, and those have to do, these are not, let's say, hard criteria, but reporting requirements for the member states, and those are set in the governance, in the regulation on governance, where member states have to provide in their progress reports, for example, trajectories of the biomass use for energy. So for what kind of energy it is used and what kind of feedstocks have been used, the impact on the LULUCF thing, so the capacity of the land and forest to continue absorbing the carbon. Then the availability of the feedstocks have to be reported, and also important for our sector, I believe, the impact on other biomass input or biomass using sectors such as paper industry. A second reporting requirement linked to bioenergy sustainability is a so-called biannual bioenergy sustainability report from the member states that also contains some information, for example, how the trade balance is developing. Today still there is quite less than 5% of biomass comes from outside Europe. How does that develop? But member states also have to report there on biodiversity impact on other sectors, and indirect land use change. Finally, please also keep in mind, and there is a new slide, please, Nicola, that we have bioenergy sustainability captured also outside the package. The Commission has proposed on 20 July already a new proposal on integrating the land use and forestry sector into the EU climate change target, and that is of course part of this approach described as scenario 1, where we look at legislation, existing legislation, and when it is reviewed, looking also at bioenergy sustainability. So there it's all about how member states will in the future account for the emissions on land use and land use change and forestry. And this is an issue that is very closely linked to the carbon neutrality issue that is crucial for the paper industry. If we have 2 more minutes, I would just like to remind about the Cepi standing position on that issue. So we have a position from Cepi since April, with which we have worked in the debate on this issue of bioenergy sustainability criteria, where we have recognized that there are challenges caused by this policy-led increase of bioenergy, and that they have to be addressed. Since in the existing policy framework, that has been strengthened over time, where at the same time we have increased demand for wood for products, and we have been able to balance the different forest functions. Well, now since the RES policy at the European level, we have this policy-led increase in bioenergy, and therefore there have been a certain number of challenges on bioenergy, which are whether biomass leads to resource depletion, whether burning is really an efficient use of material that could otherwise be used for creating more added value, and how actually this monitoring of carbon sustainability can be addressed in European at the European level. And we have therefore had in our ideas on bioenergy sustainability also divided into two parts: the biomass sourcing, where we look again on whether the country where it's coming from is accounting LULUCF emissions or has this monitoring in place. On the forest management, that there could be some basic criteria on the country level again. And then on conversion, we have been also strongly advocating that that there should be greenhouse gas emission thresholds also for biomass, not only for biofuels, and that there should be conversion efficiency requirements as well. And we have been mainly also focusing on looking at whether it is really necessary to support electricity only plants in the future, or the conversion of coal plants into electricity only plants that have a very low efficiency. So all in all, I think we could say that our principles set out in the Cepi position on bioenergy, they seem to be quite well reflected in this position of the Commission on the issue. Of course, we have to look now into the next steps and the nitty-gritties of the proposal, but generally I think we could support that the part on bioenergy is quite a pragmatic approach, and along the principles that we've been setting out in the debate as well. We have formed a dedicated task force that will look now into more of the details and then decide on further action in the Forest Committee soon. Thank you very much for listening on this quite crucial issue of bioenergy sustainability policy as well. And with that, back to Nicola.
Yes, thank you, Ulrich, and apologize to everyone who's attending the seminar if we had some technical difficulties. We are holding this webinar in two different places at the same time, and Ulrich is technically really running out of one meeting in the Parliament, and soon we'll have to run to the airport to catch a plane. So, but I thought we thought it was good to still hold this meeting because it was important to give you a fast overview on the whole program. Now, I still have a few slides on the electricity markets, 4 slides to be precise, and then we will start collecting questions. As Ulrich is soon would like to run to the airport, I will prioritize questions for Ulrich. So if you have questions on biomass, please don't hesitate in posting them, and then we will address them as a first issue. Now, on the electricity market design, so we are moving a bit away from the target setting elements, but in a way it's quite instrumental, particularly when it comes to the promotion of renewables in the electricity systems. So the electricity markets are changing. The way electricity is produced has been changing very much in the last years, and we see more and more the share of variable and decentralized renewable energy sources, particularly when it comes to wind, photovoltaic, that have been fundamentally changing the way electricity markets are working, and this has required some changes also when it comes to the way the market operates. So that in this new proposal there will be much more emphasis on flexibility and interconnection of markets. but yet there are some issues that are quite important and in a way also conflictual. On the one hand, there is the issue of ensuring that lights don't go off, and this is also particularly important for electro-intensive industries like ours. At the same time, cannot be that with this excuse we keep on keeping the system power plants which are not operating just in case of emergency. And that is the whole discussion about capacity remuneration and how to make sure that these capacity remunerations to power plants which are there to be used just in case of emergency, it doesn't become a new way of subsidizing stranded assets from the power sector. There were some leaks about this. There were some leaks about these proposals in the media for quite some time, and that has really created some difficulties for some resistance from some NGOs. Because exactly around this issue of subsidizing especially coal-fired power plants, which in some cases, in some markets where capacity remuneration already been taking place, de facto the coal-fired power plant, all coal-fired power plants, quite inefficient, they've been the ones winning in this competition to be remunerated. So in the last round, the European Commission has put a standard of 150 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour produced for new power plants, meaning that if power plants is above that parameter, will not be able to participate in national capacity mechanism schemes. The issue is that, and this number comes from a parameter that already the European Investment Bank is using for giving financial support to new power plants. Here, the issue would be, of course, whether the number is the right one, what is the new power plant, what happened to the existing ones, and all this will be part of the big discussions. There is also much more focus on the role of consumers becoming what they call prosumers, so both consuming and producing electricity, and try to facilitate this decentralized production of electricity, particularly when it comes to photovoltaic, and who knows, by 2030 a lot of micro wind turbines will be popping up on the roof of different houses. Also, there is much more emphasis on cooperation between member states, particularly to avoid a time of crisis, which could be the case, for instance, this winter, if the French nuclear power plants won't be operating, and what is the knock-on effect on France, but also on neighboring countries like UK and Germany and Belgium. And also, there is an attempt to try to adapt the current institutional framework to make sure that we go beyond national borders when it comes to competencies of the energy regulators, the transmission distribution operators, the ones that are operating high voltage lines, and the distribution system operators. So try to really see how can this be integrated in such a way that there is much more cooperation beyond everyone's borders, whatever borders those are. When it comes to the wholesale electricity market, there are some areas in which they try to strengthen, I will say, the short-term markets, and areas in which they're trying to promote a much more, I would say, level playing field. I think everything would be up for discussions, but just to flag the key ones on the strengthening of the market, there would be this trying to increase the cross-border trading, particularly when it comes to not only to move from day-ahead market, but more into the intraday and balancing markets. Try to make these markets much more dynamic to enable a much quicker reaction to electricity coming from non-programmable energy sources such as wind and solar. There is a much more focus on rewarding flexibility, generation, demand response, storage. That's something where I think we'll have quite some interest in make sure these rules are also fitting the way our industry operates. And then also much more focus on real pricing to show scarcity. And this real pricing is not only about wholesale electricity in itself, but it's also about the tariffs for user networks, which is also something that would be part of each intense discussions. When it comes to level playing field, one issue that for sure will be part of long discussions is basically in the proposal the renewables and CHP will no longer have priority access to the grid. That is an attempt to bring everybody on the same level. They try to balance this with the curtailment rules, whereby when it comes to when it's too much electricity supplied in the grid and some generation will have to be taken out of the grid, well, the last one to be taken off would be the renewables, and the second last would be CHP. And whenever there is this curtailment, there would be a remuneration system in place. And as well, there will be an extension of balancing responsibilities, particularly for renewables. These are areas where already the renewables industries have been very critical in saying that, yeah, okay, that you give a reward when it comes, a remuneration when it comes to curtailment, but that doesn't help in getting more renewables off the ground. Okay to be paid, but that doesn't help in getting more capacity. So that would be some areas where you can already expect quite some turbulences in there. Two slides still to go. One on the last one quickly on electricity markets. The ACER, which is the Energy for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, is the European agency. It will require, I mean, according to the proposal, the ACER will have more competencies. Now, without going too much into what these competencies, I just wanted to flag, and they are underlined on your screen, that there are some issues that we discussed until now that are of quite some importance also for this sector. And those would be part of the so-called network codes, meaning that these are codes for that would be drafted by the European agency, the ACER, and in cooperation with stakeholders, and then they will be passed to the Commission, and the Commission will pretty much adopt them mostly as they are. So a lot of decision-making process will be diverted to the European agency, which is based in Ljubljana, in Slovenia. So my last slide, just kind of a few remarks from my side. Clearly, you see in this package is enormous when it comes to legislative proposals, the impact assessment which are accompanying these proposals, all these studies which are assessing how well or poorly policies have been developed at national level. Studies, assessments, we didn't go into the energy cost and pricing, but there's also a lot of material there to see what have been the recent trends in energy prices evolution. The presentation comes in less than 24 hours after the package was adopted. I think the adoption was around 12, so now it's 11:10, so we are just below the 24 hours. And we've been just scratching, I would say, the top of the legislative iceberg. There's a lot of work, and of course we will need your support for this. These are proposals from the Commission, which means that this is just a beginning of, I think, a very long journey. We'll have to go through the decision-making process in Brussels, and then we still need to be implemented at national level and then we saw before with the Acer, then we still need to wait for network hosts to be developed and adopted. Lots of turbulences already in there to be expected, just like the macro ones. The whole issue of governance and targets I've been mentioning several times in the presentation. I'm sure there will be quite some head scratching around whether this governance is going to deliver the targets or not, and if not, what to do. Tensions, national versus European legislation or competencies when it comes to energy policies. Energy is still very much a nationally determined competence. How this is going to work out, let's see. Conventional versus renewable energy sources. The whole issue of capacity remuneration, priority access to renewables, these will be all part of very tough discussions. Bioenergy sustainability criteria, which is one of our core issues. Ulrich has been explaining quite in some details the proposal. It's a novelty. So as every novelty, we require lots of time to digest, and we'll see lots of voices coming around. And last point, what will happen to the overall coherence? Because we are talking about packages that, well, legislation which in one way or another are tapping into another legislation. Renewables tapping into electricity markets, efficiency the same. Governance applies to everything. So how is this, how the overall coherence in this whole package would be ensured? It's a big question mark, and we need to see in this process how to make sure that things will ultimately adapt in something which makes sense. Okay, that's all from my side. Now it's I'll leave the floor to you for question time. Let me see what kind of questions have been already put forward. Okay, at the moment I see one question, which is on the Energy Efficiency Directive. And the question is basically looking at the FIDA directive already today as a cap on energy use. What are the likelihood of removing this cap and instead get another type of target design? Question comes from Anna. Anna, thanks for the question. I think it's a bit still premature to see on what are the I would say the strategies and the package just came out yesterday, and we need to see a bit the details and where are the major issues to be placed. But what I can say is that certainly looking at previous discussions, there is an issue of how to define this energy efficiency target. What do we mean with it? Is it an energy reduction, saving? It is an improvement compared to business as usual, and what this business as usual is looking like. And at the end of the day, there are some issues which are linked with if we are promoting energy efficiency in sectors like households, for instance, that would expect to deliver some reduction in absolute energy consumption, thinking about refurbishing of buildings. But when it comes to more efficiency in industry, well, being more energy efficient doesn't mean that one will necessarily reduce the total energy consumption. It can also be more efficient, but increasing production and consume more energy. I think this will all have to be seen when it comes to details, and I think there is a general understanding that, of course, nobody wants to cap industrial growth, but at the same time, there is this feeling that if you don't put a number there, nobody will do anything, and we need to find a way to balance them. So I hope I answered this question. Now, let me go to something which is perhaps for Ulrich. Ulrich, there's a question like from Johan, like, please clarify the 80% greenhouse gas savings requirement for biomass regarding the end-use criteria for bioenergy sustainability. Yeah, probably we have some issues with the presentation. So if you could just, Ulrich, if you're still on the line, can you perhaps explain a bit more what is this 80% greenhouse gas savings for biomass? Ulrich, are you there?
Yes, I'm still there. So there is today there is energy efficient, so greenhouse gas savings criteria applying for producers of biofuels. So and there is a methodology that looks at the fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, and then comparing the biofuel greenhouse gas emissions. And today we have a requirement for biofuels that those emissions need to be 60% lower than the fossil fuel alternative, and I think from 2017, 17%. And the proposal from the Commission is to extend this greenhouse gas savings requirement not only for biofuels, but also for biomass in when it's used for electricity or heating and cooling. And there the proposed threshold is 80% in comparison to the fossil fuel alternative. That is the. Did I understand the question right? Is that answering your question?
I hope so. Let's see if John is. Well, I think so. Thanks, Ulrich. Now, moving to the next question. The first one is, does the winter energy package include any provision that is administrative burden endured by industry, like mandatory audits, reporting and the remit and so forth? And if not, would the future debate be an opportunity to advocate for reduction of administrative burden? From Sylvain. I think the overall idea behind the Commission macro proposal on the governance and also on the other provisions is sorry, Ulrich, I would like to ask you to mute yourself because we are having some interference on the line. The idea is on the whole package is to simplify the administrative burden. So that is the intention. Then, of course, the question is it going to work? Yes or no? I think they've been focusing very much on simplification of administrative burden between European institutions and member states, but not so much about what does it mean about complying with these member states reporting. So I think there is it will be an opportunity for us, but first we have to do our own homework and understand what does it mean in terms of administrative burden, and then be able to bring back our issues and subsequently also to find solutions. Okay, Ulrich, you'd like to mute yourself. Sorry, there's some background noise and I cannot do it from the office. Another question is also from Sylvain, is like, from what you explained, it looks like the Commission is not supporting capacity mechanisms, so we're talking about electricity markets. Does it mean the member states are supposed to kind of bring to an end such mechanisms? The answer is yes and no, in the sense that the Commission is clearly quite irritated by this capacity remuneration mechanism because they go against the whole concept of integration of energy markets. And I think in the accompanying studies that they've been bringing forward, particularly on the sector inquiry done by DG Competition on electricity markets, the comments on the way capacity markets have been operating until now, they were quite negative. They were showing a lot of inefficiencies and unnecessary cost. So the Commissioner has tried to do all they could to limit it. But on the other hand, they need to cope with not only the status quo, which is the most difficult to address, but in a way easy from a legislative point of view, from a regulation point of view. But the point is that there is always this security of supply issue. And how is the security of supply, which is a national competence, meeting the needs for having a cost-efficient electricity market where electrons are supposed to flow freely across borders? And member states are, they know that whenever the lights go off, they will be the ones to be blamed. And there's not enough to explain that, yeah, the lights are going off, I don't know, in France because in the UK there is a shortage. You know, that doesn't work. The citizens will be always going back to governments. So there is this trade-off, this balance that needs to be struck between security of supply on the one hand and a cost-efficient functioning of the market. Yeah, and then there is the additional element on how is this all fitting with the decarbonization of the economy, because there's also the part where things become a bit more complicated. Okay, Ulrich, are you, if you're still there, there is I think a question. I think I will still collect one or two questions, then we would bring to a close this seminar. So the question is Ulrich, are there any comments including high conservation value in the criteria? And that the question comes from Martin. Now I hope that Ulrich is soon in the position to respond, because he's starts going being on his own on his way to the railway station, and I don't know if down there the telephone can has a signal. Otherwise, what I'll propose, and I'm now talking to Martin, is that if you don't manage to recuperate, if I don't manage to recuperate Ulrich in the next few seconds, I will save your questions and I will send them to Ulrich in writing, and then we'll try to make sure that your questions are also are properly addressed as soon as Ulrich is available. Yeah, I don't seem available anymore, so I guess he must have run to get the airport. Okay, I see no more questions, which makes me believe that we have somehow managed to give you what is an overview of the package, and then I'd like to thank you for your active participation. I apologize once more for the technical problems which sometimes happen, but I hope you managed to get a decent overview of the whole, of the main parts of the package. And then this is, as I said before, this is just the beginning of a long journey, and we'll be working on every single detail of this proposal in the next weeks, months, years, I'm afraid. Well, that's all for the moment. Thanks again for attending the event. I wish you a nice day, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you, and bye.